Welcome to Journey from Jacob. From our first breath to our last heartbeat, we are all on a journey. Jacob was a biblical character whose journey is documented for our benefit. Like all of us, there were unforgettable moments along the way which required decisiveness. One of those decisions determined his destination. We will not only discuss Jacob's journey, but Israel's as well, right up to date. May this podcast inspire you to make choices along your way that will benefit others and guide you to the destination we all long for.
Welcome back to Journey from Jacob, a podcast produced by Comfort My People. I want to take this story back to its origin. The from Jacob part kind of sounds confusing because you don't journey from and tell a story. You're journeying into to tell the story. But the biblical story starts beyond the beginning of the Bible even, because God created you and I in his mind before the creation of the world. And so this story is known to him before it even happens. So this story is an intersection between spiritual world and the natural world, the world we live in and the world we don't see, but we experience it. And if you're born again, that's the only way you can actually understand it, according to the New Testament. And the Old Testament bears it out because there's a frustration, there's a tension there that people are being told something, but they don't seem to get it. They don't seem to get it deep enough to actually contribute to the story. And then it goes off course. So that's something common to man, and we have to be very mindful of it as we're following on this journey. So this journey has to be your journey in order to make sense. So it's an intersection between the seen and the unseen, the natural and the supernatural, but it can't be told unless there is this intersection and they travel together. So we've seen some of the hardships already. We have seen over and over again, not just with Jacob, but going back now into Abraham. But you got to see something else that's going on, is that there's this affection that's coming from God to the participants, the human participants like you and me. There's this affection he's trying to communicate throughout the story. And sometimes when we read the words or heard the words spoken, taught, or preached, it's this oftentimes a harshness to it, like, this is a command, this is God speaking, and he's authoritarian, and you better get it or you're going to end up in trouble. And that's not how it is. There's times when God is very strong, there's no doubt about it, and there's times in the future when we're going to see his arm unbared. It's going to be just visible, and he's muscular, let me tell you that. It's spiritual, but we're going to see the effects of his power. If you're a believer, you will see it, and it won't be directed towards you, but it'll be directed to make final the opposition in the spiritual realm that has caused us living in the natural realm to suffer. Now, consequences are the result of wrong choices. So it's not just Satan. We don't do this. We don't start blaming everything on him because we are responsible for our actions. And we're going to see this, the decisions that Abraham made and Sarah made and Abraham compliant with her are going to cause trouble. They do cause trouble. And it's not to our advantage to just go over and say, boy, Abraham was a real dunce. How could he do this? God speaks to him personally. And yet we miss the point because we're supposed to be reflective as we read, not condemning. Jesus did not come to this world to condemn the world, but that in this world, we would have life and life more abundant. So I want to take you back to the place where the story really has its roots. Even though we are going through Genesis right now, God makes something very plain sometime later. I don't know the exact number of years, but from Abraham to Moses, he's living in the wilderness, and God approaches him and tells him about his task in this redemptive story, which is going to be the revealing of the law, for one thing, main thing, but also just living it out. He's 80 years old when God calls him. And he spends 40 years in the wilderness before he dies, never seeing he saw the promised land, but never entering it. So this is what he told him in the beginning when he first met Moses, and Moses first met him. And he said this unto Moses, you shall say to the children of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me unto you. This is my memorial unto you and your descendants for all generations. He mentions, this is what I want to point out, that this is how I'm going to be known, and this is how I want you to let me be known in your sons and daughters and grandchildren, that I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is my name forever, and this is what should be told to all generations. And I just want to promote you to think about that. When's the last time that you taught, whether you're a teacher or just in conversation with a friend, a believer, or your own children, that the God of, we believe in Jesus, we believe Jesus is God, but he's the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He wants us to know that. And so in order to know that, we have to know the story regarding this continuity, this continuous sense of descendancy from Abraham and Isaac, Isaac to Jacob. Because when he starts this, which we already read about, God's saying, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless all those who bless you. I'm going to curse those who curse you. But in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed, and your descendants forever. So Abraham's had no kids by that point. He's still called Abram. So we're going to continue on. If you have just starting with us, I recommend you go backwards, start backwards a little bit, but hopefully this you can start right here as well and get it. So we went through this incredible spiritual episode that Abram went through in Genesis 15, following on the heels of this satanic meeting after he came back from winning a war that he fought for his nephew Lot. So here we are in chapter 16. And it says here that Abraham went into Hagar and she conceived. Now, why would he go into Hagar? I thought his wife's name is Sarah. Well, the problem is Abram's been living in the promised land now for 10 years. And Sarah said to him, look, this is now I'm paraphrasing my version. He says, she still has no kids. They've been there 10 years. God promised that I'm going to give you kids like the stars in the sky and the sand in the sea. But they don't have no kids. And it's 10 years. Think of 10 years ago where you were with God. And you're wondering, when is this promise? When is his word going to materialize in my situations I've been crying out to? And so Sarah was in that place. And she said, Abram, go to Hagar, my handmaid, and have kids with her. So Abram did not argue with her. He just figured, okay, I'll do that. So what was he doing really in the sense, if we step back a few yards, and Abraham was not stopping to pray, number one. And the other thing is he thought in his own mind, he leaned on his own understanding that maybe this is it. Maybe this is why Hagar is here. And so he's complicit. He says, okay, now this is the same scene that happened in the garden. When Eve was tempted by the serpent, she bought into the apple, or it's not an apple, but she ate it, and then she gives it to Adam. Adam didn't say a word about not eating it, but they were commanded not to eat it. So, the whole story starts on the wrong foot. So here we are, similar thing happening hundreds of years later, and Hagar conceives, and she bears a son. But before she had her son, who will be named Ishmael, God told her that his name would be Ishmael, because the Lord listened to your affliction. Now this is important, because we're really not hearing much about Hagar's story, but right now when he names her son, which is yet to be born, because I hear him. Ishmael means I hear. The Lord hears. God hears. And so he wanted to comfort her. So God loved Hagar, and he loved Ishmael. So this is this story behind the story, that God's love is going to pour out promises into the people that are not part of this covenant. So he went in to Hagar. She conceived. But here's the big part. When she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Who's her mistress? Sarah. She had contempt for her mistress. What did Sarah do? She didn't do anything. She just said, why don't you just go into Hagar? She's young, she's pretty, and, maybe you'll have a child through her. Abraham doesn't argue, and he has a son, and he names him Ishmael. So this is 10 years after they're in Canaan. Ishmael grows up. 12 years later, he has another son, but this one through Sarah. Now, this is the crazy thing, is Sarah had given up. She's living a miserable life. I mean, this is how I'm picturing it. For 12 years, she's like, what? Why did we ever listen to God in the first place? I can picture that. Now, I'm not condemning her for that, but there's a long period of time. 10 years, she has a son that's not in her house now, who's not her own. And her mistress is basking in the fact that she's the one that's the promise is coming through. So now we're in chapter 16 still, and this anger, this hostility begins to grow between Hagar and her mistress, Sarah, until God shows up. Now, that doesn't take place until the next chapter. But before that, I want to just say something regarding her son Ishmael. So, because this is going to tie in right till today, God describes something to Hagar. And it's a prophecy, because he's not born yet. He says, "He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he shall dwell over and against all his kinsmen." So, what is that about? Now, I've heard people say this who are clearly replacement theology teachers, and not all of them, but Ishmael was the father of the Muslim faith. And he was the promised son of Abraham. This is how their Quran deals with this. And it doesn't deal with this part, though, that he shall be a wild donkey of a man. But when they're told this, this is the answer the mullahs will give, the Muslim teachers will say, this wild donkey of a man means he's going to be a hard worker. He's going to bear the burden. He's going to live in difficult places, in wilderness and deserts where there's no water. And everyone's hands are going to be against him. Now, oh, really? What a hard way to live. But that's not what it's saying. It's his hand is being against everyone. And in return, everyone's hand is against him. Everyone means the people around him. And he shall dwell, and this is interesting and important, he shall dwell over and against all his kinsmen. Now, this isn't condemnation. This is biblical prophecy. If we fast forward thousands of years now into our day, the Muslim world, which are the descendants of Ishmael, have trouble getting along with each other, in case you haven't noticed that. And a lot of the fighting is infighting within the different sects of Islam, even within their own sect. If you look closely, which most people don't, at what's going on in Gaza right now, is that Hamas is killing fellow Gazans who are Muslims. Why? Because they disagreed with them, because there's fear that they have been spying on them or giving intelligence about them, and they just kill them in the streets. Like, not an ounce of compassion. Why? Because Islam means submission. And so submission means you who are in charge, you have to maintain your position. You can't give it up. And this is what we're seeing. His hand is against everyone. But there's much more to be spoken about this. And so then if we go on to Genesis 17, God starts to make this clear. So Ishmael is 12 years old. Abraham has a son through Sarah. And God says this to him in Genesis 17. "I will establish my covenant between me and you." Now, this is before Isaac is born. "Between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you." Now, offspring there is a wide term. So Abram's going to have a lot of kids, but he has to be more defining for this to be understood. So when God said this to Abram, right before it, God appeared to him. Now, Abram is 99 years old, and God appears to him now after all this time. He's appeared to him previously, but after all this time, he's starting to define this covenant with his son that's soon to be born. And when he said these words I just read to Abram, it says that Abram fell on his face. I mean, this is an incredible picture there of humility, and maybe he answered prayer. And so he says, "Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations." Now, with you can easily glance over that, but can also mean within you. My covenant is already within you. I inserted it with the promise in Genesis 12. He doesn't have to quote where it's located, but I inserted that into you and into your DNA, that it's going to continue on through you. So he says, "No longer shall you be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham, for I have made you a father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you for an everlasting covenant. And I will give to you and your offspring after your land and sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God." So this is future. All the land that they conquer, and this will be through Joshua and later David, but it's even more than that because they didn't fully conquer the land that God promised. It's going to be theirs forever, their possession. Get this straight, Abraham, but none of them are born yet. And Abram's like, "Okay, well, it sounds good, but how's this going to happen? And so it's an honest question. So then this interplay goes on, and Isaac is yet to be born, but God says to Abraham further down in chapter 17, verse 15, God said to Abraham, and as for Sarai, your wife, she shall not be called Sarai anymore, but Sarah, which is princess, shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and out of her shall become nations, kings of people shall come from her. And then Abraham, now remember, he fell on his face in the beginning of this conversation, and now this conversation is continuing for a period of time. And it says, Abraham fell on his face. Same words, but what did he do? He laughed. He laughed and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who's 100 years old? And Sarah? She's 90. How's she going to bear a child? And he's laughing. He thinks it's funny. So Abraham said to God, oh, let Ishmael live before you. And God said, no. Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you should call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him. So now he's getting focused with this covenant, for an everlasting covenant, and for his offspring after him. So no more are any of Abraham's children going to be recipients of this covenant. Not that they won't benefit from it, but this covenant is specific. Why? Because God's going to trace this seed. Remember, this is Zerah, the descendants right from the lineage of Seth. We've already up to Abraham, and it's going to be through them. It has to be. And this is why this is a continuous story. It has to be. So he says, and as for Ishmael, I've heard you. Behold, I blessed him, and I'll make him fruitful and multiply him. He'll be a great nation, which Islam is like incredibly large. And he shall father 12 princes, which talks about the Muslim nations. There's one Jewish nation, but many Muslim nations. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, and she shall bear a son next year at this time. So God went from Abram and started to live his life out. And we follow this story, which we're not going to go much further here, but we'll see that when Abraham is visited by an angel of the Lord, it seems like, to him at first, and then he finds out it's actually God and two angels alongside of him, and they meet. And they have a meal together, and Sarah prepares it. And in that process, she still hasn't had a child. And so she hears Abram speaking to these two angels and God. She doesn't recognize that they're who they are. But she overhears them talking about Sarah will become pregnant, and she will bear a son, and his name shall be Isaac. And Sarah laughed. It's like, how can this be? Come on. How can I, who am so advanced in my years, how can the way of women, the way of pleasure, which would mean becoming pregnant, be with Sarah? She's saying this to herself. And she's worn. She says, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? And then God shows up in the conversation and says to Abram, why did Sarah laugh? And then Sarah says, no, I didn't laugh. For she was afraid, it said. She realizes that these people are authoritative. That's she's feeding a meal to. And God says, no, but you did laugh. Now, I've heard this say like God was angry at Sarah because she laughed at him. But, let's get the human side of this thing straight. She's been faithful to her husband to the point of disgrace, and yet she's still married. She's still his wife, and she's still serving. He says, come on, let's go. We got to make some food for our guests here. And yet she laughed. I mean, she's past the way of women. And at this age, you expect me? I'm 90 years old. Am I going to have pleasure? I'm worn out. Now, what would you do if you were in her shoes? But she laughed at least. She didn't get mad. She didn't throw a tantrum. She didn't throw a fit. So why did God show up and tell his son from Sarah is going to be called Isaac when the son from Hagar was called Ishmael? Well, Ishmael just means that God hears. Isaac means laughter. Now, that might seem like, just a play on words because Abraham laughed and then Sarah laughed and then Isaac's going to be called laughter. To me, I think that's honor and it's respecting their human response to an impossible promise. And it is extremely impossible. Have you ever been in that position where you've been waiting and expecting, planning, doing things, putting other things aside so something else could take place and it seems impossible? It's not going to happen. And there's a deadline to it and it just keeps growing. I know exactly what that feels like. In fact, I'm in that place now. But God wants us to laugh at the impossibility of our life as we follow him. It's no less difficult. This is an emotional struggle. The wrestling match that we saw earlier with Jacob, which will actually be later in this story, that was difficult. He wrestled the angel of the Lord, which turns out to be God. He didn't know it at the time. He wrestled through the night, through the darkness of night. That's a long time. And sometimes this is what we have to do. We need to wrestle out unbelief and allow God's promise to take its place. And this is what laughter does. Let me just tell you this about laughter. It's somewhat of an anomaly for people that have struggled so much through life. By the way, I want to go back to Jacob's name, because his name was Jacob, and God changed it to Israel. So this becomes the Israel of the people today and the land today. His name represents both people and land and promise. It's rooted in the promise. But his name was changed from Jacob, which means struggling against God, struggling against truth. And Israel means struggling with God. It could also mean prince with God. But the struggle part has not disappeared. This is what I want to bring out. The path of the righteous is oftentimes feels like a struggle. And the struggle means we're going against the grain of humanity, against the grain of this kingdom of darkness that prevails in this world so often, unless we take authority over it, unless our belief conquers our unbelief. The key thing is believing, trusting. Do not lean on your own understanding. Look what happened. When Abraham was facing, the land of Israel was the Canaan at the time, was having a famine. So Abraham heads towards Egypt because it's green there. He hears that it's fertile there. And they go. Well, that's all well and good, it seems like. But the way of man seems right sometimes, but it ends in a dead-end street or destruction, even worse. So they go to Egypt. And in the place of Egypt, God still blesses him, and he blesses the Pharaoh through him. But it's not right. He shouldn't be there. He should have continued on with God until God told him. If he told him, go to Egypt. But he didn't. He made a decision to go one way, and he could have gone the other. So fast forward to their return. They leave Egypt, and they leave Egypt with a ton of cattle and livestock, and things seem to be going good. But they also left there with people, servants. So guess who one of the servants was that came out of Egypt with Abraham and Sarah? A young lady named Haggai. Why is she coming with us? Well, because you took her, and because you came to Egypt when you probably shouldn't have. And now this trouble has begun. So this trouble, that the consequence of this did not affect Abraham in the beginning, but has affected all of mankind at this point, because things don't naturally get better on their own. It's a matter of a built-up consequences of wrong decisions, and we're in that place now where the sons of Ishmael and the sons of Isaac are not getting along too well, and it's causing grief throughout the whole entire world. Now, I'm not saying it's the only cause of grief, but it's one cause of grief that we have to pay the consequences for. Now, do you curse Abraham in that process? No, not at all. You recognize that these things are taught to us. These things are written on our behalf, upon whom the end of the ages have come, that we might learn from it. This is from the New Testament. It's quoted differently in Romans and Corinthians. So we need to learn. This is it. If you want to know why is the purpose of the Old Testament, or more properly the Hebrew Bible, is that we would learn from it and grow from it and appreciate our ancestry. If you're a believer, this is your spiritual ancestry. And so it's our opportunity to take it kind of lightly. At the same time, the difficulties show up, and find faith, something that's exciting to live by. It's a gift. I can't understand boredom, let me put it that way, but I knew what boredom was growing up. But when I got saved, there was no more. And I honestly say that. There was no more boredom, because I was living for Jesus, and I knew what it was like, what to live without him, and it was painfully harmful for me and people around me. And so this lightheartedness is what we're supposed to live by, because Jesus said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. So this laughter is the fruit, literally the fruit of the Abrahamic covenant. The first fruit of the covenant, fruit meaning descendants, was Isaac. And God named it that way. This covenant has a lightness to it. And why did he bring laughter into the world? Because the world needed laughter. And here's another thing. The Jewish people have this DNA. I know that sounds suspect. Oh, and here we go again, promoting the Jews. It's not that way. It's God has given the Jewish people a certain particle, if you, it's microscopic. We can't see it. It's not measurable. But where this capability of laughing through hardships has been part of their history all along. In fact, there was an article in Time magazine, Why Are the Jews Still Laughing? And this goes way back. And in that article, it said that if you were to count the number of Jewish comedians in the world, and I really don't remember when it was written, but it's in my lifetime for sure, that there's far more Jewish comedians per capita than any other people group in history. Why is that? They're asking this question, why is it? And there's no other answer. It doesn't make sense. They're the ones that have gone through the hardships like no other people, have been persecuted and kicked out of countries like no other people. And ultimately, the final solution Hitler thought was in his hands to execute, but he failed. And he failed because God has made eternal promises. And in that promises, there's stories you can read about activity in the Holocaust, during the Holocaust. That were horrible, absolutely horrible. But there was also a sense of humor, not everywhere. I'm not saying it was a funny thing, but that just flowed. And it was to keep them alive. This element of laughter. You know, it's good. The Proverbs say it's like medicine to laugh. So it's a gift from God. And embrace that gift. Not the kind of laughter that's dark and at the cost of putting someone down. That's not God's laughter. But the laughter that is just because this world is actually kind of a funny place to live in. So take that to heart and then begin this recognition, if you haven't already, that we live a naturally supernatural life. And that's for our benefit and the benefit of others to want what we have. Shalom, shalom.
We bless you for taking the time to consider this message. May it cause you to be fruitful and effective and lead others along the way with confidence and determination. Check out our website at comfortmypeople.com to become better informed and equipped to restore righteousness to the people of Israel, America, and beyond. Please consider sharing this and visit us on social media. Shalom and blessings.